Let's now talk about creating linear functions to model data. So again, we're dealing with linear functions, and quite often we're just going to use that same slope-intercept form that we're used to. But because we're dealing specifically with functions, it's going to be f of x, or as we can see in our first question, s of x, but really the concept is the same. It's still a linear function. So for our first one, and here's the strategy that I look at. We know in this function that this is just a static amount. It's you pay it one time or you do it one time. It's not per month or per sale or per year. So whenever it says per something, I know that's probably going to be my slope because this is going to be a per item. Like, for instance, on our first question, the speeding ticket is $150 plus $5 for every 1 mile per hour over the speed limit. So I can see from that that the $150 is a static amount. I pay it. I don't pay $150 for every hour or mile per hour over the speed limit. It's just $150. So that's this guy. The $5 for every 1 mile per hour over the speed limit means that this $5 needs to be multiplied by number of miles per hour over the limit. And I know that based on the way it's written. 5 for every 1 mile per hour over the speed limit. So 5 is going to be my slope, and x is going to be that x miles over the speed limit. So my function here is going to be s of x because they tell me to use s of x, and then 5 times x plus 150. So again, the 5 times x because it's per mile per hour over the speed limit. So now that we have our function created, we can use it to solve questions like find x when s of x equals 300 and interpret the meaning. So let's start with just solving. There's two ways to solve a linear function. One way is if we replace s of x with something, and remember s of x represents the total cost of the speeding ticket, and x represents miles over speed limit. So we need to be very careful about what we're plugging in where. Here it says s of x is equal to 300. So that tells me I'm going to take my function I just created, and instead of s of x, I'm writing 300. I want you to notice, that was a bad plus sign, I want you to notice that the 300 replaces the whole s of x. That's one thing. I know we talked about that before, but I'm going to tell you again. Don't just replace s with 300. I have some students do this. 300x equals 5x plus 150. And as we can see, that is a very different question from what I'm actually being asked to do. So don't do that. Replace s of x, which represents the cost, with 300. Then I'm going to solve. Solve by, I'm going to subtract 150 from each side because I'm trying to get x by itself. I'm going to divide each side by 5, and I get 30. So I'm done solving, but then it says interpret the meaning in the context of the problem. So whenever it's talking about context, it's saying let's talk about it not in terms of this is the answer I came up with mathematically, but what does that mean in terms of the cost or the miles per hour. So here I would write a sentence that says, when I am driving 30 miles per hour over the speed limit, the cost of the ticket, so 30 miles per hour over, has a cost of a ticket of $300. 300 because s of x was equal to 300, and that was the cost. For our next question, we're going to go through 3 parts of this together, but at any point, if you want to press pause and work ahead of me, please feel free to do that. Here we're going to start a lawn mowing business where the startup cost includes the purchase of a self-propelled mower for $308. So here's something I need to know about. $308, and it appears that's a one-time cost. I only have to buy the mower once. I don't have to buy it for every lawn I mow, or I wouldn't make any money. You spend $2 per house on gas and oil, which means this is going to be $2 times the number of houses to find out how much I'm going to pay. You decide to charge $30 per lawn, and now things might get a little bit crazy because this is 30 times the number of, I'm just going to put number of houses again. Houses, lawns, we're going to assume is the same thing. And so this one's a little bit different than our last one because if you'll notice, it looks like I have two different slopes, which I do because I'm asked to find two different things. So let's start with the first one. I'm writing a cost function. So the cost function would be any values that I am paying. So what am I paying? I'm going to highlight those in green or outline them in green. I have to pay for a mower and I have to pay for gas and oil. So that other number, $30 per lawn, that's how much I'm actually going to get, which means I'm going to save that for my revenue function. So cost, typically I'll use C of X. Remember, I want to do the slope first. So this was $2 times the number of houses. So again, we're letting X represent the number of houses or lawns or however you want to write that. So this would be 2X plus the 308 because I have to buy the mower. Next question says write the revenue function, and revenue is how much money are you then bringing in to hopefully balance out what you've paid out to mow people's lawns. And obviously this is the only thing that has to do with revenue. I'm charging $30 per lawn, that's how much I'm taking home. So my revenue would be just 30x, where again x is the number of houses or lawns that I'm mowing. So on the second one, I didn't have to use the plus 308. Why didn't I? Because I'm not being paid $308 to get a mower. I had to pay that out. That was a cost. So now we have two follow-up questions to that, and as you can see, I've recopied the two functions we just came up with on the last page. Here we're trying to then determine what's the profit or loss if I mow 100 lawns, and then what's the minimum amount of lawns I can mow to make sure that I'm actually making money and not losing money in mowing the lawns. So first, profit or loss if I mow 100 lawns. So you can do this in a couple of different ways. I think most people would just take the C of 100, which would mean take 2 times 100 plus 308 to find cost, and then do the same for revenue. Find revenue for 100 lawns, and then we're going to compare those values. So for my first one, for cost, I get 200 plus 308, or at 100 lawns, it cost me $508 to run my business. For revenue, 300 times 100 is 3,000, so I'm making a revenue of 3,000. So now what? Because I still haven't answered the question. Well, we know that profit is equal to revenue minus cost. And again, if profit is positive, that would mean revenue was greater than cost. So let's go ahead and find the profit, which would be 3,000 revenue minus cost of 508, which gives me $2,492. So what is the profit or loss? I had a profit of $2,492. The other way I could have gone about that is sort of combined those two functions together and kind of gone from there, but the way that we did it is just fine. The other question has to do with at what point do we turn a profit? So I'm going to say that I know that in order to turn a profit, that my revenue has to be greater than my cost. So use a little bit of inequality here. So if my revenue is greater than my cost, that means 30x has to be greater than 2x plus 308. And now I can solve that. Subtract 2x from each side. 28x has to be greater than 308. And when I divide each side, I get x is greater than 11. Now, please be careful with this because it says, what's the minimum amount of lawns you can mow to turn a profit? So, can I mow 11 lawns and turn a profit? No. If I mow 11 lawns, then R of x is equal to C of x. So I haven't turned a profit. I haven't lost anything either. But that means I must mow 12 or more lawns. Now, why did I choose 12 even though my answer was 11? Because this is the symbol that I used, greater than. I need my revenue to be greater than cost, and that means x needs to be greater than 11. And I can't mow half a lawn, so the next one is that I would mow 12 or more lawns. The last one is here for you to try on your own, so press pause, try this question, then press play to check your work. So first part, obviously we're dealing here with a carpet cleaning machine, $28 to rent it for 24 hours, $10.98 for each medium-sized bottle of rug shampoo. So the question here is which one of these is slope and which one is a static amount. And it looks like we are answering for the number of days, and that's going to help us to know which one is slope. So because it specifies that x is the number of days, then I know that I'm going to use 28 because that's how much it costs for 24 hours. I have to take that times the number of days. So that is going to be my slope. Now, is it possible that the other one could have been slope? Of course, because it's $10.98 per bottle. And so if the question said, let's solve for how many bottles, $10.98 would be my slope. But because they're going to tell us how many bottles, $10.98 is going to be my static amount. That's going to be my b value. So I'm going to write a linear function s. Now notice this one says s and not s of x. It's okay, we're still writing it s of x because it is a function. It's a function based on x, which is the number of days that we're renting the machine for. So again, I'm going to use my slope first, 28x. And then I need to know for 2 bottles of shampoo because this one specifies 2 bottles of shampoo. So you could write 2 times 1098, but you always want to make sure that you end up simplifying. So my final answer would be 2196, which is just 2 times 1098. So that's my function, and notice in my function I don't have any dollar signs because we don't need that. It just confuses things in our function notation. Next question says, evaluate S of 3 and interpret the meaning in the context of the problem. So this one tells us to use S of 3, which means, unlike that last question, that first question we did together, I'm actually plugging in 3. So this is what I'm going to, this is what I'm going to write. S of 3 equals, and then I'm going to just do that math. So 28 times 3, S of 3 gives me 84 plus 2196, and 84 plus 2196 is that S of 3 is equal to 105.96. So that's my answer mathematically. What does that mean in the context of the problem? Well, I was plugging in 3 for x, and x is the number of days, and 105.96 was S of x, which represents the cost. So that means if I rent the machine for 3 days using 2 bottles of rug shampoo, my total cost is $105.96.